የዘር ልዩነት በሚመለከት ረገድ
the man, the king, the almighty. His imperial majesty Hile Selassie I.
የሚባለው እምነት ዋጋ እንዲያጣ ሆኖ ካልተወገደ ባንዳገር ውስጥ አንደኛና ሁለተኛ ደረጃ ዜግነት ካልተሰረዘ አንድ ሰው በቆዳው ቀለም ብቻ የመብቱ መጓደል ካልቀረ ለሁሉም ሰው የዘር ልዩነት ሳይታሰብ እኩል የኢኮኖሚክና ተመሳሳይ ሰብአዊ መብት ካልተሰጠው እነዚህ ከዚህ በላይ የተዘረዘሩት ሁሉ እስከተፈጸመበት ቀን ድረስ ሁላችንም የምንደግምለትና የምንመኘው የዓለም
His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I on Monday, December 29, 1958, inaugurated the first session of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa with the following speech. It is with great pleasure that we, on behalf of ourselves and our beloved people today, extended our warmest greeting to the delegation of Economic Commission for Africa who have gathered here from all over this great continent, and in particular to the Honorable Doug Hammarskjöld, Secretary General of the United Nations, who is our honored guest on this occasion. We welcome you all to our capital. Opening session of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. It's true most historic and significant event for the great African continent. But a short half century ago, only the most far-sighted individuals dared predict that within 50 years Africa would have so far progressed along the path of political and economic progress that a conference such as this, where representative of 9 independent African nations as well as representative of several other African countries have gathered together in solemn conclave to consider the common problems of Africa and African peoples would be possible, and yet this has come to pass, and today we are assembled here for this very purpose. Our heart flows in the attainment of this moment. Only a few years ago, meetings to consider African problems were held outside of Africa, and the fate of its people were decided by non-Africanists. Today, the tradition of Berlin and Algeria has been repudiated, and it is thanks to the conference of Accra and now of Addis Ababa that the people of Accra can at long last deliberate on their own problem and future. The political growth of the people of Africa, a development which has come to fruition within the lifetime of every one of us here present, is one of the most striking and extraordinary evolution in the recorded history of man. The political coming of age of the African people is ample testimony that we are witnessing the inauguration of a new and splendid period in this continent history. The number of African states which now enjoyed their independence is only 9, but this number will grow in the future. In 1960, additional states will emerge into the brilliant sun of freedom, clear evidence that the political growth which in a few short years has transformed the status of so great a number of African people has not yet finished, and that it will not come to its end until the goal toward which this movement has steadily and extraordinarily progressed has been totally realized. Political independence, however, is but one part of the complex of problems which face the African people in their struggle to achieve their rightful place in the world. It is paradoxical that while Africa is potentially the richest of the continents, large number of her people still lead an existence that can only be regarded as substandard. A major cause of this lag in Africa economic development has been the lack of education of her people. Let us not be too proud to face these facts and to recognize Africa's deficiencies and defects. Let us face honestly and frankly the fact that by the standards of the modern world, the African people today are poor. Our poverty need not cover us with shame. Africa, despite the predominantly agricultural base of her economic, produces only a small percent of the world foodstuffs. Indeed, Africa produces scarcely enough food to support her own people. The average wage of the African worker compares unfavorably with that of other areas of the world. The average African may, if fate has smiled upon him, receive the minimum amount of nourishment necessary for physical survival, but rarely more. Among the reasons for the poverty and hard life of the African people must be numbered the fact that heretofore most Africans have not enjoyed the freedom which they are now attaining. In addition, the lack of the capital essential to the development of their economy and the shortage of technically qualified personnel have severely limited Africa's capacity for economic growth. But just as we must not be too proud to recognize the facts of Africa's economic situation as it exists today, so we must not be cast down or discouraged by the magnitude of the problem which faces us. For Africa, it's potentially rich. She has enormous deposits of raw materials, and the total extent of her wealth is by no means yet known. Africa produces large quantities of several of the world's basic minerals and metals. She produces large quantity of various agricultural products such as palm oil and cocoa. The fertility of much of her land is potentially high in extreme. A tremendous potential for the production of hydroelectric power and the irrigation of her land is found in the lakes and rivers of this continent. The vista that opens before the Economic Commission for Africa is fulfilling the weighty responsibilities laid upon it by the United Nations General Assembly, which is vast. The tasks are immense. Much labor and toil will be demanded not only from those who will constitute the permanent organization, but also from the governments of all countries and territories in fulfilling the commitment and discharge of the responsibilities. The economies of African states have too long existed as separate, self-contained, isolated entities. African countries have for too long been forced to nurse their own economies and puzzle out their complicated problems by themselves, or else have them handled haphazardly for them by others. We are all only too well acquainted with the difficulties and barriers that African people have had to overcome in coming together to deliberate on matters to economic interest. But it is impossible to believe that individual countries working alone and isolated from their neighbor can ever achieve their objective, and the African people must therefore work and cooperate together if the economic development of his continent is to be furthered. The Ethiopian people in particular, long isolated socially and geographically, have had to plough a lonely furrow in many fields of economic endeavor, lacking the right and the facility to draw upon the experience and knowledge of others who were attempting to solve almost identical problems. Now, however, as almost every paragraph in the charter of this commission emphasizes, the goal on which our eyes have always been fixed as primary goal for our people, the raising of their standard of living, has become the declared objective of the government of the member states whose representatives are gathered here today, to be sought in every way by concerted action, cooperation, coordinate policies. These honorable delegates are not just words, but great and noble conceptions. In them and in what they stand for can be found the key for fulfillment of the longings and the hopes of millions of Africa. Our task, the task of all gathered here, and of those other African countries who are not numbered among the representatives of this first session of the Economic Commission for Africa, is to improve the economic lot of all African people, to raise them to standard of living comparable to that enjoyed in the most highly developed region of the world today. This is a task and a challenge which must be met, and because of this touches all of us, all must labor and work for success in this endeavor. This land of which you are the honored guests has known and suffered from the horrors and brutalities of war, threats of armed conflict, the obsession with war and armed might are evils yet to be eradicated from the minds of men. So long as they survive, progress towards the high and noble objective to which this organization is dedicated will be handicapped and involved in darkness. In the mobilization of economic resources in search for ways to improve the lot of man, whether African or not, the threat of peace stands as a grim obstacle. The essential prerequisite for the economic and social contentment is world peace, and without such contentment, that weeds of discontent luxuriate and threats of peace develop. We pray that peace may be vouchsafed to all men, that the labor of this commission may even be conducted in the atmosphere of harmony and cooperation.
እኛ አፍሪካውያን ትግላችንን አናቋርጥም። በመጨረሻም መልካም መጥፎን ድል እንደሚነሳና እኛም እንደምናሸንፍ ጥርጥር የለውም። የዘር ልዩነትና ጭቆና የቅኝ አገዛዝ መሰረቱ ኢኮኖሚክ ነው። እንደዚህም አሰቃቂ ተግባሮች የሚወገዱት በኢኮኖሚክ መሳሪያ ነው። በአዲስ አበባው የአፍሪካ መሪዎች ጉባኤ የአፍሪካ አገሮች ዋና በቅኝ አገዛዝ ስር የሚገኙት አፍሪካውያን ካሉበት የባርነት ቀንበር ነፃ ለማውጣት በሚያደርጉት ትግል እንዲረዷቸው በማለት በገዢዎቻቸው ላይና ሙሉ የኢኮኖሚ ሳንክሲዮን እንዲደረግ ወስነው በስራ ላይ አውለውታል። ስለሚመስለን ከማህበሩም ዓላማዎች ጋር የሚስማማ ስለሆነ መላው የተባበሩት መንግስታት አባሎች ተቀብለውት ስራ ላይ እንዲያውሉት አጥብቀን አደራ በማለት እንለምናለን። ሌላ ምርጫ ካለ የደቡብ አፍሪካና የፖርቱጋል መንግስታት ሀገሮቻቸውን በኢኮኖሚ ረገድ ለማድከም የሚፈልጉ አይመስልንም። እድል ስናገኝ ጊዜ ሳያልፍ የሚቻለንን ሁሉ እናድርግ። ደስ የማይል እርምጃ ከመውሰድ እንዳን። በዛሬው ጊዜ ታላላቅ መንግስታት እንኳ እድላቸውን የመወሰን ስልጣን በእነሱ እጅ ብቻ እንዳልሆነ ማስታወስ ይገባቸዋል። ሰላም እንዲኖር የሁላችንም ተባብሮ መስራትን ይጠይቃል። Change.